Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This week we're going to be making a second storage unit for the Garage Workshop. Roll the intro. Welcome to the second video in the series on storage cabinets for the garage. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it at the top now. The first thing I did was I got some really accurate measurements. I wanted to essentially duplicate the first unit that I made. There is another video on that, which, as I said, I'll link. Then I set up a stop block to cut the timber. Now, this project was going to be done pretty much from recycled timber that I had lying around the garage workshop. I did go out and I bought 3 pieces of stud timber, 2 of the thicker pieces, as you can see here, and 1 more smaller traditional bit, and then I cut them to size. Now, 2 things. Number 1, I don't think I've mentioned this in a previous video, but I've actually changed the blade on my miter saw, and my God, it's made night and day difference. It's insane the amount of better quality cuts that I get. It's absolutely sharp as anything. I haven't had any wood tears or anything, but I didn't quite have enough wood. So what I did was set up a stop block, as you can see there, and I cut down just 2 extra pieces to attach to each of the pieces of wood. I then began to cut down what essentially were the brackets for the shelves, which you'll see in a minute. When I'd done that, and I'd made sure that I'd got enough, because obviously that you need 4 for each shelf, and there were going to be 4 in it. It left me with 20. Quick maths there. When I'd got them all cut down, I then went into the pocket hole, and I say this every time, can't beat a pocket hole clip of film, can you? This pocket hole has been brilliant for me, absolutely amazing. I got it last Christmas 2020, and it's paid for itself more than enough. And if you're watching this video at the time it's being made on the 22nd of November 2021. The tool shop, I think it's called, actually has this exact Craig dig in their black jig in their Black Friday sale at the moment, and it's got something like £20 off of it, so that's worth a look. So when I did that, as I said, I went back and I joined these pieces of wood to make them the same size, because I wanted to make sure I had 4 identical legs. And I know potentially I was risking this by attaching a bit at the bottom, and especially as this is where the foot's going to go. But I was very confident in the fact that I was using a lot of reinforced wood at the bottom, because obviously there'll be the other bit on this that the leg will attach to, and there'll be the big thick shelf. So I wasn't too worried about joining it. And as you can see, I went a bit overboard with the pocket holes, and I screwed 2 in from either side. Apologies for the slight getting in the way of the angle here, but the one good thing is I have sorted out the autofocus problem on my camera, so a lot more focus in this video than on my previous ones. So after I attached the first one, it was a simple case of attaching the second one, and when I'd done that and I'd switched it over and put the others in, I offered it up expecting them to be dramatically out of size, like most of my things. They never go right the first time, but I was amazed that all 4 of them were identical in size. Absolutely perfect. So when I'd done that, I'd finished cutting up the wood. These were the bits of wood that I was going to use for the shelves. I actually decided against using them in the end. I did cut them up and I got them all ready for the right size, but I found when I went through my wood pile, I had some good wood that I could potentially cut down. This really big thick bit you can see here was absolutely perfect, and I found this sticking out of a skip, this piece of timber, and it would have been a fortune had I paid for it. I was really, really pleased with finding that. Just a couple of little offcuts for the wood. Now, I did do this deliberately, and I know I've had some comments about using the fence in my table saw, and this is the reason why I don't use the fence. This is my blade on full extension, and it wouldn't cut through. As you can see, it wouldn't go through it, but I have got my respirator on this time. It's really important you wear PPE, and apologise if I've left that out in some of my other videos. You know what it's like woodworking, you just get so carried away sometimes that you forget. So I ran these pieces of wood through. Now the last piece of wood was a bit more challenging. It was a thicker piece of wood, and you can't see it here because I've speeded up the footage. Well, you can by the amount of time it took, but my table saw really struggled to get through this wood. It was proper tough, proper tough, which is exactly what you want for a wooden storage unit, because it's going to be there forever. It's outdoor treated timber. But as you can see, this piece was massive and it didn't break through the first time when I ran it through, which wasn't a problem. And I know that looks really dangerous, but trust me, that blade was never coming through the top of that wood. There was a good 5mm at least of difference. I then flipped it over and ran it back through. Next thing was to make the side supports and the middle support. If you looked at my first video, I think I put 2 middle struts in because I knew that that storage unit was going to have really heavy items on it, like pots of paint and things like that. This one isn't. It's just going to have sort of general storage. So once I'd cut them, it was a case of going through all the pocket holes again, 2 pocket holes on each end. And when I'd done the pocket holes, the next thing to do was to start with the sanding. Whenever I start sanding, it always reminds me of Jason Hibbs from Bourbon Moth Woodworking. I don't know if any of you follow him or have seen his channel. If you haven't, please get on it. Not only is he funny, he's incredibly talented woodworker, amazing, but he always goes on about how much of a drag sanding is, and blimey, don't I know it. I did super speed this up, but I wasn't even properly sanding it. I was just more taking the rough edges off. But it took a bit of a while, but I was pleased I did that because I got some really, really nice edges. And I have to say, give it to my table saw, they were great cuts that came out of that blade. I've got another blade for my table saw, and I will be changing that in the future. Next thing to do was to lay it out. You might have wondered why I put that little mark on the bench there. And I wish I could tell you, but I've completely forgotten. But it was important for something. So I put the 2 sides on, the 2 ends on, sorry, and attached those. I had just about enough room to work on this little bit of my bench. I can't use my portable workstation that you've seen in my other videos, because actually there is an ongoing project on there that I'm keeping top secret. And it's taking up all the space. So apart from doing it on the floor, which isn't very even, I was left with no choice really but to put it together on the top of my work desk. So I bashed all of these together. I'm not going to show you all the footage because obviously, you know, it is the same thing 4 times over. But I put them all together and I attached them with the screws. And here you can see one of my mistakes. These 2 bits on the side, I actually, rather than laying them flat ways, I laid them sideways, and I think this is going to give me some structural problems somewhere down the line, because I don't think that wood's going to be thick enough. So when I put it together, I made sure that that wasn't a shelf that I'm going to put a huge amount of load on, because I don't want to be left with a storage unit that's not very strong. And as you'll see at the end, it is a little bit wobbly, this storage unit. It's not as tough as the other one. I don't understand why. Maybe it's something to do with the construction. And by that, I don't mean it's wobbling all over the place, but it is definitely not as sturdy as the other one. It's got a bit of a wobble, but they are going to be connected anyway. When I put the 2 of them together, I'm just going to put a couple of little holding screws through because they're never going to go anywhere unless I take them out to maintenance or do something behind them. They're not sort of going to go anywhere. So the next thing to do was to start cutting the wood. And again, I'm using those recycled kitchen units. I've just about got to the end of those kitchen units. I have to say, they've done so many jobs, those. On to the next day now, and when I'd got the strip of glue off, I offered them up, drilled some holes. They already had a lot of holes in them, so I didn't have to do too much, luckily, drilling and screwing, because, as I said, they were already sort of full of holes, really. The next stage was to attach the first 2 legs, and then I could take them outside and put them on my work stands. This was a lot more difficult than it looked, actually, trying to simultaneously hold it, get a straight line and put it on. The next one, I went for the blocks. These are 42.5 centimetres between the bottom of the block and the top of the shelf below, which is exactly the measurements of the other storage unit that I've got in there. And I just did a really basic way of keeping this straight, just by using that block of wood, you can see, and resting it against the blocks until they were flush. And that was the perfect way of getting it nice and straight. Apologies for this little bit of filming. I realised I blocked it, but when I put it on, you can see there how that bottom shelf is jutting out, and of course that then clashed with my block. So I just went in and nibbled a little bit off the ends, and it worked an absolute treat. So when I'd done that, I just continued the process of putting those blocks in and attaching the shelves one by one as I went through. The next job was to attach the heavy duty casters. I used some quite long self-tapping screws for this. You'll have seen me do this in the previous video. I literally just drew a very small pilot hole, literally a couple of mil in, and then attached the feet. I put the two locking feet, you can see that at the front, and the sort of non-locking feet at the back. These are a really good buy from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. They're fantastic. I think they're about £14, which sounds a lot, but they're proper heavy duty. And my other unit that I made in my earlier video has got all that paint and everything on it. It's got a ton of weight on it, and I can freely move it around the garage, even fully loaded. They don't seem to worry or stress about the weight on them. But as you can see from this clip, as I'm pushing, you can see the whole unit is moving, which obviously it shouldn't be. It's almost like concertinaing, and that's because it hasn't been properly strengthened. And I realised it hadn't been properly strengthened when I tried to lift it up, as you're about to see now, one of those heart-wrenching moments. Luckily, Mrs. B was there to look very concerned and to point out the fact that the screws I just used a single screw at that point just to attach the sides to the sort of shelves, had just literally popped out. I don't think the screws I used were enough. And I also took out my Aldi workbench there. You can't see it off camera, but it totally buckled and bent it the other way, so that took a bit of straightening. But when I got it back up and I'd realised the damage wasn't as bad at first as I thought it was, I just went around the process of just straightening it all back up. On actually one side, the side you can see me on now, didn't come apart at all. It was just this side, and everything had sort of dropped. So I got a clamp out, got it back on, got it the right size, redid the screws that were in there. And then I just went to town really on putting in extra fixings, which I'd always planned to do, but obviously I wanted to do them towards the end without having dropped the unit first of all. But you know, these things happen, it's woodworking. As I said, this channel is a warts and all channel, so I absolutely battered in those screws as deep as I could, and by the end it was definitely a lot more secure than it was at the beginning, which is really important. Okay, so as you can see, the storage is finished. If you saw the video, you would have seen I had a bit of a major disaster there where it all fell apart, or so I thought. Actually turned out it wasn't, just a couple of the screws that I'd used to hold in the sides, just temporarily while I screwed it all in, had come out. And I think I used screws that were a little bit too small. So here's the finished unit, a little bit wobbly, nothing too major, and obviously where it's going butted up against the other unit, it shouldn't be a problem. I know it doesn't look great, very well aware, but as you'll know, if you're making woodworking projects at the moment, the price of timber is absolutely incredible. And just these two pieces of wood that I bought two of these wider stud timbers, and one normal stub timber was over £20, and 2 years ago I'd be paying probably 13, 14. So I wanted to use as much of my reclaimed wood as I could. Also, I used most of the doors and sides from the kitchen unit that I recycled. So that's made the shelves a little bit stronger, and it's also meant I haven't had to lacquer it. So overall, yeah, please, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. It's not going to be seen, it's going to be covered in a blue covering. So I don't really mind how it looks, but overall, really pleased. The most important thing is it's done now. Thank you so much for watching. If this is your first visit to the Garage Workshop, please subscribe and look back at my other videos. If you're a regular viewer, thanks very much, and I'll catch you all next week on the Garage Workshop. Have a great week, woodworkers.